Hi, everyone. This is Andrew Fitzpatrick on the Wise Life podcast today, or the Mama's podcast hosted by the Wise Life. And today, again, we have on Phil Anderton. We'll say author and warrior of Becoming a Dangerous Man. You can check out his podcast online. And Phil, I noticed in your most recent email that you talked about proper planning. So I wanted to talk with you today a little bit about that proper planning. When you're thinking about becoming a dangerous man and what's happening everywhere in America and in our world today, the content of this letter is, I think, really on target for what we're dealing with today. So maybe we could open with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrea. Thank you for having me again. I enjoyed our last conversation, and let's look to add some value today for your audience. So the thought today is proper planning, right? Planning requires getting ahead of, like having the conversations, having the ideas, the what if scenarios, right? So what you and I have been discussing and what we really want to share today is we really can't wait any longer. And I think the reason people wait, I think the last few years has kind of deconditioned conversation. It's scared people into not sharing their opinions. So what you and I are doing and what we want to do is we want to help people with, it's not that hard, right? There's some things you need to leave out. There's some things you avoid. And that's what we're going to get into today, and then the second part would be where to start, right? So that's the two things we're really going to talk about, is where to start with planning and preparedness, and then the things to avoid, and then how to get those people on board, how to get to the beginning so you can get started and you can feel a lot more confident going into 2024.
I agree. And if you don't mind, I'll add a slight layer here. I think that one of the things that a lot of people that adds to what a lot of people are experiencing is this feeling of being in a surveillance society and this censorship thing we're dealing with. And part of what I hear you saying, and I'm reminded of an old story I've heard actually, part of what you're saying is, let's do the Irish jig. Now, let me take that apart for just a moment. The Irish jig was born at a time when I think it was the Irish jig, they took away their language ability. They wouldn't allow them to speak in their own tongue. And it wouldn't allow them to practice all sorts of cultural things, including the dances and things that they used to dance. The jig was born out of that. There was this partition where they could see people from here up under surveillance, but they couldn't see them from here down. So they could jig. They learned a jig step, created a jig step so that they could dance without looking like they were dancing as they moved around in this thing. What you're talking about in essence is doing a verbal/lifestyle jig. We're still who we are, but we're not saying it in the same way. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you bring that up, because the dichotomy there is social media is where you and I have reach,
exactly.
But it's not where we have impact, right? And so what we're really trying to get at today is social media is a resource, and you're right. It is very surveillance. It's very scary, because if you say the wrong thing, you like the wrong thing. I mean, Andre, I still get comments from men who say, and women who say, hey, I love that last comment. I love that last post, but I can't like it because my company follows my social media. I get that once a week from men and women, once a week, sometimes twice, depending on what I post, where I will get a private DM that says, thank you for saying it. Loved your post, support you, love following you. And it'll be somebody I've never seen react to my comment before.
Yep, I
but
get
it's
that
because
too.
they're in fear of being tracked and linked to me, who, God forbid, because I'm a man's man and women are women, and masculinity and femininity, and I appreciate families, I'm considered controversial, and you're worried about liking something I say. So that's what you're referring to with that kind of deep state social media. So how do we get around that? Well, we get around that by focusing on us, our family, and the people we can see, touch, feel, and have real conversations with.
Right. What elements in our life do we have control over that we direct?
Yep.
Right. And I think the really interesting thing to take apart for us today is, like, we're not talking about being radical tinfoil hats, that whole 9 yards. Yeah. So take that apart for me. I hear that strong negative there. Take that
Yeah.
apart.
So don't get me wrong. I can certainly, and I've been guilty of I've been guilty at times of putting a tinfoil hat and getting sucked into some rabbit hole of conspiracy or scary or fear porn or mainstream. I've definitely gone down that rabbit hole. It's usually not productive. There's
No.
a 99.9% chance that my outrage or my if my heart's broke, it impacts zero into whatever it is that I'm getting upset about, right? And certainly we've learned in the last few years, when you lead with stuff like that, when you engage in conversation like that, it's often you'll either find an echo chamber that agrees with you already, and you're not really going to have much of an impact in their life. You're just going to rah-rah each other that you both feel the same way about it, or
Right.
you're going to meet with the other side that is insanely different, and I'd argue wrong, but they're going to have their echo chamber of rah-rah. You're not going to change their mind. And what you're
Correct.
going to do in the middle is you're either going to be canceled, your post is going to be taken down, if you're too opinionated against the narrative,
Or they'll
and you're going
deplete
to
your
lose.
views.
And you're going to lose everybody in the middle. Nobody in the middle is going to gain anything. You'll have your echo chamber agree with you. You may set off some troll that gets you blocked, and the people that you could have an impact with, they're lost, or they don't even realize you exist because you were canceled. Okay,
Right.
so on the social medias, it's really a lose-lose, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree, and I've also been guilty of, we'll say, experiencing that spiral down, because you start digging, and the more you uncover, the more upset you get, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And this kind of leads us to our next focus, right? Because I think, well, if you're in a family, a traditional family, the woman's I always look at it this way. So I may offend some people, maybe I won't, I don't know. But I always look at the woman as the heart of the home and the man is the perimeter.
Yes.
Right? And those two work really, really well together. But as the heart of the home, if I am spiraling and getting in my own rah-rah circle or something, I'm not actually creating change, and I'm wreaking havoc in the area where I have the most influence and control. We're not talking politics, right? We're talking culture. We're talking family. We're talking our family culture, our community culture. How do we shift those things? That's not politics. We have influence there.
Yes,
Right?
100%. And so let's start there with what we avoid, right? So
Yeah.
first off, social media resource, potentially a great resource, because I've coached men, a quick story on the value of social media, because I do talk crap about social media, even though I've gotten into LinkedIn in the last year. I coached a guy in Oklahoma, and I would challenge him on our calls. I would say, hey, man, what are you doing to have coffee? What are you doing to go to the gym? I asked him kind of, why do you need me, right? Why can't you go? He said, Phil, I live in a small town in Oklahoma where meth and basically drugs, alcohol, trade, like he basically painted a picture where it's like, Phil, I don't want their fucking opinion. He said it like that. He's like, I come to you because I need something different. I live in a small town in the middle that's not doing well. A lot of people have made a lot of bad decisions. He said, I don't want their opinion, frankly. I don't want them to know what I'm going through. I don't see value in having that conversation. So social media can absolutely be a resource. It can connect people that otherwise wouldn't have met, who can share and expand on ideas. So social media is a value. However, what I tell all my men, and you'll agree with your mamas, I can't be there for you when shit gets real, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's an accident, whether it's something that happens. I won't be there for you. I'll be a resource. You can reach out if we're that close. Shoot me a text. I can pray for you, but I can't physically help you, right? So what we are focused on right now is let's get out of the social media right now, because we can't really solve that algorithm anyways, right? That's all the deck stacked against us. Let's talk about you and I. Let's talk about our friends and family who we can influence and potentially help, right? So what we're going to avoid, let's knock these out real quick. No tinfoil hat talk. Don't start a conversation with, hey, did you see the World Health Organization in May 2024 is gonna, and I don't want to get your podcast taken down for this, but let's say hypothetically, these people were meeting with the 194 countries that are signed on to allow them, and they're going to sign a treaty that is unconstitutional in our country. They're going to sign a treaty that gives this three-letter organization the opportunity to plan, prepare, and respond. Think about that. Plan, prepare, and respond to pandemics. And and basically we're going to be there with 193 other countries, and we're all potentially going to sign this thing that puts this, or that's going to happen in May 2024, right? That's hypothetical for purposes of this. Don't start the conversation like that with your 23-year-old daughter that I have, because she's going to say, what are you talking about? Like, huh? Right? If you start with because you're aware and you're in the know and you're paying attention, you got to meet them where they are. Meet them where they are, right? So leave the tinfoil hat, leave the 3-letter agency, leave the name dropping of the global elites that are likely helping pull the puppet. Leave all that shit out of it, because for if you're in your echo chamber, yeah, sure, you can all rah together and paint the enemy like they are, but we're trying to accomplish change and influence people who are going to be potentially showing up at our door asking for help when shit happens.
Right. And we want to empower people. I think that we want to empower people. And I think of this as simple as some of what you're saying is as simple as what I think of as family and community culture. So I take my kids on walks and I teach them plant identification. I teach them medicinal plants. We go hard from the garden. We've grown all sorts of herbs, and I'm telling them the uses of these herbs. I'm not talking tinfoil hat stuff.
Yeah, you're not saying you're going to need this. You're going to need this in a doomsday scenario.
Right.
This is how it's going to help you.
Right. What I'm doing is providing them all the skill sets they're going to need in that scenario. But I'm not talking about that scenario. Right.
Yes, exactly. Yep. And to the social media point, you're going to get flagged anyway. So that's why we're
totally
talking in hypotheticals right now. So no tinfoil hat, no politics, right? I used to be this guy. Even a year ago, I used to be, hey, Trump's going to save the day. And if only he would have won. Look, I'm still there. I still think a lot of bad shit happened. I still think nothing's what it seems. It's all smoke and mirrors.
We're doing a jig.
It's all a swamp. Just call it what it is. It's a swamp. Don't lead a conversation with politics. Don't ask who they voted for. Don't ask who they're voting for. Who cares? Accept what it is. It's a goddamn swamp. They're not helping you and I. Let's put it like that. Nobody with a title, a pick a side, they're all trash. I'm to the point now where they are trash. They're not solving our problems. They're not in it for us. Both sides have their donors and their people that they're interested in, and it ain't we the people. 80% of us are being left out to dry. Don't lead with politics.
Right. And I totally agree with that. And I think that also, I think it's okay to support people who want to try to step into those leadership positions and make a difference. People who say they're going to make a difference. We'll see if they do or don't. But I don't think it's wise for we the people to get lost in that, because the thing that I think that happens, the social media wagon, the news wagons, all those things, is people take that stuff in and think that that's what we have. But you're forgetting all of us families, all of us middle people out here that are the American citizens, the majority.
Absolutely. They're look at them like you look at us. We're a resource. They're a resource. There's potential. I'm not saying don't vote. I'm not saying don't support a candidate at the local level. I'm not saying don't throw them a little bit of hope, but they're not part of your plan. They're not part of your plan. Exactly.
Right. What's your local plan? What are you going to do with your family? What are you going to do with your community?
Do not wait for an election to help you.
Right. I agree with that.
Look at Hawaii. Do we need to say any more? Look at what happened with the wildfires in Hawaii. Do you think anybody in Hawaii would vouch for politicians coming to save the day with what they're dealing with right now?
Or the rich people of the world?
Exactly. Right. And you just leave it as that. But again, you don't even need to say that. Just go ahead and vote. But tell me that's not your plan, right? That's what I would say. Tell me it is not your plan to wait until November 2024 and think Trump's going to come in and just be able to save the day. Right?
Yeah, I don't think any of us have the luxury of that anymore, Phil. And I've never understood, actually, personally. Let me reframe that. I think that it isn't wise for we the people, American citizens, families, mamas, papas. It isn't wise for us to wait for some savior to come fix things for us. I mean, our nation wasn't even built upon that. It was built upon go-getters who are willing to work with their local people, their families. I mean, we're talking actual families. We're talking face-to-face meetings with people. Like, do you have a plan with your community? When things get real, do you have a plan with your community? Do you have a family plan? Do you have those things ironed out? And it isn't about anything other than just being sensible, being prepared. For example, if you have your water being brought into your house via electricity, and that's the way the pump works, what
A lot of people
happens?
don't realize that power goes down, the lift stations go down, or if there's any kind of pumps involved in that system, it ain't
Right.
magic.
How do you handle it then? The electricity goes out. How do you handle getting water into your home? Just using that as an example. Or if your home is heated with electricity, right? If that's your only source of heat, how do you problem solve that? And it doesn't have to be a huge disaster. This can happen any day, actually. Any day of the week, these kinds of things can happen.
So let's get into that. Let's knock out the last two that we're talking about, right? This isn't about when you're asking them. And here's the important thing: before you can get to asking questions, what do you need? You need them to want to. You need a little bit of interest. You need a little bit of, okay, I am a little nervous. I don't feel prepared. You can't just start texting them, hey, what are you going to do if? You can't just send them this podcast and say, hey, listen to these guys on this podcast, and you're going to figure out how fucking screwed you are. You need some buy-in, right? So let's get the last two things out of the way. So we said no tinfoil hat. We said no politics.
Yeah, no fighting.
No arguing, no fighting. You need buy-in. You're not going to be able to convince them. They're going to have their own come to Jesus, their own red pill moment. You can plant seeds. You can show your confidence in leadership because you're prepared, and maybe you secondarily impact them to, hey, Phil's always pretty confident whenever this stuff's going on. I wonder why, right?
Yep.
And then the fourth thing is, no, I told you so. It kind of goes with fighting. No, I told you so, right? There's decisions people made to wear masks or line up to get certain things that others didn't. Don't say I told you so. Don't say I told you should have. Leave all that, right? So fighting and I told you so, leave all that shit out of it. If these people matter to you, this is about tomorrow and not yesterday.
That's right. You're echoing in a different way. You're saying the same thing that I am saying quite frequently. Unite and communicate across lines of difference. Stop looking at the difference and building a wall. Unite. That's how we were built as a nation, through unity.
Absolutely.
And there's so much of that available for us. We just got to knock on the door, open it, say, hey, how are you doing today? Can we go grab a coffee? It really does start that simple, I feel.
And that's a good point. Wouldn't you think there's probably some pride and humility where some people still haven't recovered some relationships from 2 or 3 years ago because it was so strong. And they were using language like, oh, because I chose not to, I'm somehow a threat to you. You're going to die because of me. All that's been debunked. All that's been shown to be bullshit. People on both sides got it. People on both sides died. Statistically, the people that chose it died at a greater rate and are, mysterious causes, right? But we'll leave it at that. All hypothetical talks, right? For the safety of your show staying on air. But leave all that out of it. Here we are. Now what? How do we help? How do we help the people we want to help?
Right. And that gets me to thinking about things like, honestly, gets me to thinking about how I grew up, Phil. I mean, I always laughingly say I grew up 100 years ago today, but really it's like, that's really what it was. We didn't have running water. We didn't have any modern conveniences. Half of our food was through subsistence and hunting, and the ability to hunt, track, know where game was.
Yeah, the skills you probably didn't appreciate then that now are gold.
That's exactly it. Like I look at people around me who are getting antsy about things, and I'm thinking, well, it'll be hard. Yeah, if it comes to it, it'll be hard, but it'll be okay, right? Yeah. It'll be okay. And you're right. That confidence is there. That calmness is there because I have that background.
That resilience. You've built some resilience through your childhood. You can look back on.
Right. And I think, well, you look at the location. If you look at the location you start assessing things like, well, if my electricity goes out, how am I going to cook? Do I have anything to cook? Do I have any stores? That kind of questions, and we think, and then as a mom and thinking of moms and with their kiddos and stuff, how do they deal with that? How do they teach their kids? How do you prepare that as a family? Right. And I think that has to be something that's individual for families and also based on where families are located. For us, we're kind of in the country, and I also have chosen to homeschool my kids. So there's a lot of influences that my children don't have that a lot of other children do have, where they get the influence of what we'll call the media, right? The various medias, and families will then have to contend with that, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
how do we shape those things?
Let me chime in too. I just want to make sure
Please.
we're clear because we're already kind of jumping ahead a little. I just kind of scared myself where I said, man, what is the rate of single motherhood in this country? And I know you have a mama's podcast, but
Yeah,
golly, I'm just thinking like, I'm a little sexist, I guess, where it's like, well, I'm a man and I have these certain roles that I fill and my wife fills these roles. What about the women who have to fill both? Like, what about the women who have to fill both? Like, I just, it's a little like, as I'm building this, I have 9 steps to preparedness, and we kind of talk through some of that I'm developing, and we're going to potentially evolve this conversation for your listeners as that gets developed, and we're going to help each other kind of move forward. I just thought about like everything we're talking about is like, I don't want to say we're biasly or what the right word is, but we're implying there's 2 people in the home because we're both family generated podcasts. We both talk to husbands and wives and mothers and fathers. Both of our audiences are generally, but man, what just it's just I don't want to say it breaks my heart because I just broke my own rule, but it's like I grew up I grew up with no dad. I grew up in a single mother home. Just thinking about all those women out there that are, I don't want to say forced because they have the ability to prepare as well, but wow.
But it's different. Keep going.
It's
I'll have
different,
some
but it's got me thinking, right? Let's make sure let's ask the questions to your audience before we start saying, because then we're assuming that they're already prepared.
Right.
We're assuming they've already answered these questions. So let's just caveat when Andrea's asking these questions, these are for you, the listener, right? These are for you, the listener, and you are more than welcome to reach out to both of us if you want some follow-up. But let's go through some questions, right? So this is how I would coach, and this is how you, the listener, could say you have older kids, say you have a sister and brother, say you're older and you have kids, maybe you're out of the house, maybe your network, right? You kept talking about community. In your community, start in your home. So let's imagine in our home first, and then you need to start reaching out. Maybe somebody in your community fills that gap. Maybe a family member close by fills in a gap. But when I'm coaching, the first thing I ask, it's like a simple scenario, right? Do you have a fire extinguisher in your home? Simple question. A lot of people say no. A lot of people, if they do, it's in a box, in a drawer somewhere. If they know where it's at, I say, does your family know where it's at? Because I'm assuming as the man or the woman, right? My wife works, I work, I stay home, right? If you're away, do the people in your home know how to use it, right? So you could take the simple question, do you have a fire extinguisher in your home? Yes. Now you can add the question, do you know how to use it? Does your family know how to use it? Does your family know how to find it in an emergency? Is your family going to try to use it on a grease fire in the kitchen? Because that's not what it's for, right? An electric, and you could take a fire extinguisher and go down the rabbit hole. But notice you can do that. You can probably find an area they can make an immediate improvement, an easy improvement. And notice we didn't break any of our rules. There's no politics, there's no tinfoil hat, there's no fighting. That is such a simple question to lead into. And you could just start right there. Do you have a fire extinguisher? Now you planted a seed, you care about them. You're asking a very general, very basic, a $20 solution with a little bit of training. You're building their confidence. Their family is saying, oh, wow, dad's going to teach. So a couple of my clients, one of the exercises we do, we get them to buy a fire extinguisher. We get them to go somewhere where they can start a fire, and we get them to have their kids put the fire out with the fire extinguisher. Very simple exercise, but every dad that I've had do that challenge that's worked with me has said that their kids had a blast, 1, learning how to build a fire, and 2, learning how to use a fire extinguisher. Simple exercise. We didn't break any of our rules, and it gets the conversation going. What else am I not prepared for? What else could I get my kids involved in? What else? And then you can talk CPR certification, AED, go into the gym. Hey, do you have an AED? Where's it located? Asking the question before somebody has a heart attack at your local gym or your school or the grocery store, right? then, and I'll let you kind of jump in now, but that is my easiest with men. That is my easiest start to the conversation. What do you think about that?
I think it's brilliant, and it parallels a lot of the things that I would suggest and some of the things I'm working towards in my own community, which is like, go show up at your local library, see if they have a space that you can use, start putting on small workshops. Hey, we're offering to homeschool age, or we're offering to families, whatever it is. It can be a nature walk where you start teaching them medicinal plants and plant identification. It can be, well, we're going to meet up at such and such park, and we're going to learn how to start fires like the Boys and Girl Scouts do, only this is like a one-day thing. You can make it donation, you can make it free, whatever, but you can use these as ways to unite your community and give them skill sets that they may not otherwise have. But the other thing that I find happens, like my kids and I did a scavenger hunt with one of the local families here earlier this year, and like they had so much fun. They were like, gosh, you're so smart. What you got me thinking about, well, what else, what do I have in my own yard that I could use? I mean, and she started asking these questions. I said, well, gosh, you probably have a bunch of spices in your cupboard. You probably have a bunch of plants in your yard, And we started talking, it led to this whole conversation about what she had in her kitchen that she could use medicinally, what they had in their yard that they could use medicinally. And all it was a scavenger hunt with a group of kids and a mom. That's what
Yeah.
it was.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say too is one of the positives to the pandemic, right? The whatever the last few years was, one of the positives was I've seen a huge uptick in homeschool. I've seen a huge uptick in homeschooling cohorts, right? Or whatever the verbiage is that you use. And you keep saying community, and I love that. Tribe. I say tribe, you say community, it's the same thing, right? It's a smaller group of people with similar values, similar, not exact, right? I'm in a tribe, my tribe, they don't always agree with everything I say. I have some pretty strong opinions on things, but guess what? They want me on their team, right? I'm on their team because the majority of the direction, the majority of opinions, and the value I bring, they put up with a few offhand comments here or there because I have strong opinions about certain things or certain people or what I would do to certain people if the opportunity presented itself, right? We don't have to think alike. There needs to be difference, but I love that you keep stressing community. But the important thing we're talking about here, before you can get to community, you have to add value. And to add value, you have to be able to take care of yourself. You cannot be showing up in a time of emergency with your hands out, with no plan, with no ability to care for yourself or your family. Well, you're not part of a community. I would argue you're not part of a community if you're not taking care of yourself first.
I totally agree with that. And it leads me to the question of, asking our audience, what is it that that you're good at, that you know how to do, that you can offer others? Maybe it's something as simple as sewing. Maybe it's baking. Maybe it is canning. Like you wouldn't believe how many people.
My neighbor has an amazing garden next door. She literally said, don't ever buy a jalapeno again. These things grow like wildfire. Just come over, go through our back door, grab a few jalapenos. Don't ever let me find you buying jalapenos. And most of the time I get fresh pickles from her. Right. But that's a simple, easy. They have a couple boxes. I have a couple boxes now because of them. Mine failed. I planted late. I didn't read my almanac, but I have the gardening. It's something a lot of people, apartments, you can have an herb garden on your kitchen, and to your point, I'm learning medicinals right now. I bought a book. I have another book coming. It's how to home remedy with things that you could grow in your kitchen, things that you can grow in your garden. Very simple herbs. Like I've seen like flower petals, like different things you can grow and combine. A lot of it has drying, baking into teas, and then drinking a tea that helps with natural immunity. And it's all stuff you can grow, because let's be real. If you put your tinfoil hat on, which you're not going to do for the conversation, but if you put your tinfoil hat on, there's talks of basic cough and cold and different medicines being taken off the shelf to force us into the big pharma loop, right? To not be able to treat ourselves and not be able to take care of ourselves.
Right. And I hear you loud and clear. And with that, I would even open with something as simple as, are you a home that has something like vodka on the shelf? And they'll look at me funny, right? But because especially if they're a non-drinking family, which a lot of families are, right?
Yep.
But you can use vodka. You can also use glycerin. I like vodka. I like alcohol because it has a better shelf life than glycerin. but you can make herbal tinctures out of that. Now, here's a fun thing when we're thinking of the pandemic and how that divided us, right?
Oh, terrible.
And how people didn't know how to deal with respiratory stuff, and there was all this stuff about it, right? I found iSatis incredibly useful. Now, I started doing a cross reference because I'm like, what is iSatis? I about laughed my head off when I discovered what iSatis was. iSatis was an American language, if you will. Guess what it is as a plant? It grows everywhere.
Really? Like a weed or what?
Yeah, it's dyer's wood. It's known as a plant for dye. It grows all over the place. It is one of the most effective anti-inflammatories, antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial plants that I know.
Wow.
It reduces.
And it's something people can grow in their backyard.
It grows wild everywhere. You just got to know how to identify it. Yes, you can grow it in your garden. You might want to actually put it in. It's like oregano. You don't really want it in your garden if you're growing a vegetable garden because it might be hard to control.
Yeah.
It might be hard to control. Like oregano is wonderful. And oregano is also another really great one for like congestion and stuff like that.
Yep.
But it takes over your garden. It's really like it'll take over.
Well, even mint. My mother-in-law all the time would just boil mint. Just simple mint, hot water, lemon juice, honey. Very simple things. But to your point, let's kind of wrap this part up so we can get in the next part, right? Asking questions to initiate the conversation. Think of the quote. What do they say? Plant the seed where you don't require to like sit in the shade, right? Like you don't need the credit. Right. We should have added that to one of the rules. Like you don't need the credit. You're trying to plant seeds. You're trying to drum up conversation. You're trying to get them to think for themselves. Right.
I don't care about credit. I'm like,
at some point, if they come back to me and they say, all right, Phil, I'm ready. I'm ready. Here's a quick joke. And I think I put this in the newsletter. That's kind of similar to this topic. I have some friends who are more successful than me. By successful, I don't mean happier. I just mean financially. I have some friends through business ventures. I see them and they're very well off. When asked about what their plan is, they say, Phil is my plan. I said, Phil is your plan? Excuse me? I did not agree to this. Like I have a family. I have a little bit of an extended family. You drive this many cars. Your house is this big. Like I am not your plan. I'm sorry. Right. But that kind of sparked some of this too is, man, I need to help these guys get ready. I need to help these guys get ready because I'm not their plan. Like I have my family. I have my tribe. They're not in it. Like,
well, I think,
go ahead.
I think to add to what you're saying, I think it's bringing up a really, really important point actually. And that is that we do need to be self-sufficient. It's so important. And in that process of being self-sufficient and showing up for other people, we have to be able to have a boundary and say, look, I'm just like you said, I'm not your plan.
Yes.
I can be your go-to knowledge source. I'm more than happy to help you with that. But I can't be your plan because I have my responsibility right here at home with me. Yeah. Right?
My door will be locked come the time. My door will be locked and I will not be opening it.
Well, because I think it's just like that, sitting there waiting for someone else to solve the problem. Oh, they've got all the skill set. But what happens is if you only have a few people in the community or wherever you're at in your tribe, your network doing that, they're going to get absolutely overrun. We need to build self-sufficient families and communities and tribes and networks.
So we're assuming that
Absolutely.
We have people interested. We're assuming that we have people like, okay, I want to learn a little more. So what's the next step, right? So we talked about what not to do to start the conversation. We talked about how you can use easy things like fire extinguishers, like, okay, let's say the gas, right? My parents my mom and her husband live in Houston. The Harvey, I called them to check in on Harvey. And my stepdad specifically said, had it gone one more day, I think we would have had looters on our hand. People were starting to get itchy and they were only down for like 2 days in Houston where he's at. They were only out of power for like 2 days, but he said, I think if it would have went one more day, think about that, 72 hours, he's worried. People were already starting to walk around. People were starting to be in places they shouldn't have been. People were starting to kind of hit the Walgreens and hit the Gap. People were starting to kind of hit the businesses, but after the businesses that aren't restocking and aren't employed and don't have power, where are they going next? I say they go store to store and then they go door to door, right? and then they go
Yes.
door to door. So you have people interested, you have people identified. Okay, I'm not going to say no to this person if they need help, if I can help, because I'm self-sufficient and I've built reserves. Just admit it. There's going to be a few people that you're not going to want to see. You got a grandma, you got an older aunt, somebody that matters to you, right? And they're just not going to get on board. You need to plan for that in your plan. Now what? Offer, once the door opens, invest in them. Invest in them. How do you invest in them? One of the things I do, I have a Costco shopping list. Here is a basic $100 Costco shopping list, right? Here is a basic 50-pound bag of rice. Buy some beans, right? Rice and beans, carbs, fiber, protein. Obviously I'm a carnivore, but I don't have a big chest freezer with meat. I have a limited supply. When that runs out, I have canned chicken. I have canned tuna. I have canned sardines. I have beans. I have white rice. I have some other things to kind of spruce that up a little. I plan to have a garden, right? So once the door opens, invest in the people who want it. Stop trying to fight the people who don't. Stop trying to convince the people they should. Once you get somebody, invest in them. That's where I would say share YouTube videos. But again, don't overwhelm them. Don't send them a 60-minute video. Send them a YouTube short. Send them a YouTube short and then follow up with them. Offer to go to the store. Offer to go to Harbor Freight. Offer to go to Costco. Offer to share. And I say all this, but I'm going to carefully caution you. Here's what I'm going to caution you. There needs to be trust, because what you're doing, you don't want to open up too much of your playbook depending on how far out of your network they are, right? You don't want to tell the community, because here's what happens in the game of telephone. If our community, everybody here kind of knows I'm the guy, right? I'm the guy that
It's like,
just
hey,
does
did you
things
know
different.
Phil's giving away 50-pound bags of rice?
Yeah, I run around with, I ruck in my neighborhood. I run around with a weight vest in my neighborhood. I have 2 German Shepherds. Like, most people know I carry a gun. So my neighborhood, granted, I'm not nobody. I mean, I live in a lot of older retired, and then there's some families mixed in. I'm not really too worried about anybody here. But if they start spreading the word that, hey, we got a guy in our neighborhood, we're good, and the wrong person hears that, okay, so there is a trust factor to how much information you give out. So I would just kind of caution you with that. But I would say lean into the people who want help. Invest in them. It will pay dividends, because to your point, community, tribe, when you make them stronger, when you make them able to fend for themselves, you as a community, you as a tribe, you are so much less likely to be calling in the government, giving up all your freedoms, giving up all your rights just for some bread and water, some bread and water to come in, for people to come in. If you as a community can say, hey, we don't need that right now, give that to somebody else. We're good. Leave us alone. Right? You can kind of stay out of sight, out of mind. You're going to do a lot better for yourself in the long run.
Absolutely. And the other thing that, assuming there is an interest, I would, number one, nurture that interest, right? Like we have a family or a middle older age couple up the road who, grow their own garden, have their own chickens. Every year, they bring us a little bit of produce in the fall, and they bring us some eggs and stuff like that. Now, kids and I do a lot of baking, so one of these days we're going to bring them some cookies. We're keeping that connection, growing that connection. But assuming that there is an interest, you nurture it, right?
Yes.
As you're saying.
Well, to your point too, you're bartering, which is a whole nother amazing opportunity. Should the grid go down, money become should any of those tinfoil hat things come true, people like you with a already established barter system, that's another way to thrive in a downed economy.
Well, and you're actually leading right into my next point, which is that when you start choosing to live a lifestyle of preparedness, not fear. Okay, we're not going, what if shit hits the fan? Oh my God, what am I going to do? I got to be prepared. No, that's a fear mentality. When you live in a sense of preparedness, you start developing a culture in your family and in your community of a lifestyle that is prepared. What happens with that is you start bartering with neighbors, and it becomes an everyday way of life. You start going to the local farm to get your beef instead of Costco or whoever's selling it, right? You start and maybe in exchange for that beef, you're giving them apples from your orchard if you have an orchard, whatever it is. But the point is that there's this cycle that starts happening that isn't dependent upon what we now understand as this big big thing, right?
Correct. And what you're
Um,
saying too, we can replace the word preparedness in your scenario with self-reliance.
yes,
Self-reliance
absolutely.
doesn't require shit to hit the fan to say, I want to be more reliant. I want to be more able to provide without so much. I mean, that has no need for any of that other stuff. You're just saying, I want to be more self-reliant and I want to support the people in my local community.
Well, and I lean into personally, I'll say one of my, I guess, ends, if you will, is I personally lean into like, I want to be healthy. I want to be a healthy, happy
Yes.
human. And when I go to the grocery store, there is no guarantee doing the work I've done, um, not investigating, that's the wrong word.
No, just
researching,
researching, learning.
researching the doing the research I've done is like there's no guarantee on a lot of the products we buy from
No.
the store, and knowing the
Even
stuff I know
fresh
about
isn't
health.
even fresh isn't fresh. I
Yeah,
just saw something about Bill Gates apples and some wax he puts on the apple where, or the
yeah,
vegetables where it can
yep.
it can be like
We
3-4 months old with the
oh
coating they put on it
it's
now.
actually that's really frequent. And
Yep.
the other thing that's happening that a lot of people really don't understand is how much monoculture and GMO crops are
Oh,
actually in our markets. But what I've discovered is moving my family away towards a more holistic, healthy lifestyle. Not only are we more self-sufficient, but we are actually healthier. We hardly ever get sick now.
100%. Yep.
And it's not just sickness, Phil. We're talking moods that are way more level. We're talking performance levels on all levels rising up, right? You were
Yes.
human. Obviously, we get grumpy, we get tired, like we're human. But my point is that all those things, since I've become more self-sufficient and worked our lifestyle towards being more self-reliant, we have a better life, period. Like we're happier, we're more
And
peaceful.
to your point, you're less and by doing that, you're less reliant on
Boom.
pharmaceuticals, stimulants, drugs and alcohol that people use to manage stress or to manage a stressful life and unhealthy eating combined with working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, climbing a corporate ladder, leaving your family behind, all the drama that comes with so much of living the American dream. In
Mm-hmm.
that sense, what you're talking about is so much more peaceful, so
Yep.
much, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right?
Yep.
What you're talking about, just it jives with everything we're trying to put together on self-reliance, building for your family, preparedness, self-reliance, and then supporting your community around you. Because to sum it all up, when shit does hit the fan, we don't go forward, we go backwards. And if you look through history, it is small, tribal, small communities, but they were very tribal. But they were the ones who came together to survive whatever was happening. When every nation fell, it didn't fall. Nope. It wasn't like a bunch of people were just erased and then they started over. Whatever title was over the empire, it just left. And then what was left? A bunch of small little tribes to restart the fight all over again and call it something different. And maybe they shifted some this way and shifted some this way, but it was all still small communities, small tribes that were in it together to survive.
I agree with you. Speaking of children and homeschool,
That's part of the fun of the live podcast.
it is. And I'm going to say that everything you just laid out there is absolutely spot on. And just layering that in, that when we choose, how to put this, when you choose to live a holistic, healthy, self-reliant lifestyle,
there you go. Yep.
When you choose
you're prepared naturally.
Right, exactly. And so it makes it easier to go to your neighbor or people in your community who may not be and say, hey, you could even create a little drive with your kids to teach them something like the components of building community or leadership. You guys could go buy, say 10 fire extinguishers, just leaping off what you shared earlier, and be like, knock on the door. Hey, we were just going through the community, want to make sure everybody had a fire extinguisher. But it gives people remembering and asking questions. It starts engaging people. And I think that the reason why I'm bringing that up is I think that that's where, with our tech culture, our phone, our computers, a lot of people struggle with that one-to-one connection. How do I knock on a door? How do I say hello? right? Without
Yeah,
social media, how do I do that?
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that, because even as we're talking, I feel like we're taking for granted how far in we've gone, you and I, and
Yeah.
how so many of your listeners, my listeners, they're not there yet. They didn't homeschool during COVID. They didn't get into homesteading. They didn't. So to your point, and that would be a whole nother conversation. But certainly it starts back with basic, like, relationship 101 almost. Like, we're maybe taking for granted that we're in smaller towns. We're already kind of, you and I are already kind of very similarly building our tribes and our communities. For the people, for your listeners who aren't there yet, I mean, you got to start small, right? Do your kids play sports? Do you go to church? Can you volunteer at your kids' school? If your kids do go to school, do you have an opportunity to meet some of their friends' parents? Can you walk, buy a dog, just have a reason to walk the neighborhood and wave to some neighbors, go to dog parks, gym memberships, work friends. You got it. It is going to take some initiative. It might be scary for some people, and let's not go down a tangent, but the downside to social media, and we may have discussed, the downside to social media is feeling you're a part of something that's not real. Feeling you're a part of a community that's not going to be there for you, feeling part of a community that's not going to experience your power outage or your natural disaster or your active shooter. I mean, the active shooter at the Allen Outlets was 5 minutes from my house. I was 5 minutes away at a different store, had no idea it happened, right? Nobody else experienced that. They saw it on the news for a hot minute when it was the hot topic, and then it went away, and then we were left to deal, and the families that were impacted were left to deal, right? Nobody in the online world is going to feel that. I was at the Texas State Fair. I watched the shooting. I was 100 yards away for the active shooter at the Texas State Fair. Everybody saw it on the news, and then it went away and nothing happened. We got out of there. Everybody was safe. But just like you in your area, you're going to experience things that none of us are going to experience with you, right? And so the downside to having a social media presence and not having a real presence is feeling like you're a part of something that you're not. It's not real. It's fake. You have to be able to touch. And I call it a battle team. I don't know what you call it. I know you say community a lot. I call it a battle team, right? Do you have 5 people, because you're the Mama's podcast, 5 people within 15 minutes? 5 people within 15. It's kind of like the fire extinguisher test. Do you have 5 people within 15 minutes that you could have coffee with, you could have lunch with, that you'd invite into your home? 5 people within 15 minutes.
I think that's a really important question, Phil, because I would be willing to bet that many, many people don't have 5 people that are what I call inner circle people.
No,
they're
that
the
have
people,
a certain level of trust. I would agree with you. Most people, COVID, whatever their reason that they parted ways or ended relationship, people that used to matter before, I would argue before 2020, we'll call it, they gave up because of that, and they lost so much more than they gained. They gained nothing. They gained isolation. They gained an echo chamber. They gained a fake world that they're a part of and they're going to take to the grave. But they gave up so much of what was a real relationship, and they probably haven't got it back.
No, I don't think a lot of them have. I know a lot of families that I know families and people just split like this, right?
Oh, yeah.
And some of them were able to come back together and some of them really weren't. And some of them are, completely estranged. Others are sort of in this unequal thing.
I can't tell you how many, I shouldn't say it that like it's that much, because I'm older, I'm 30, I'm much more refined anyways. I've already kind of moved to the quality over quantity, so I'm not looking to have a bunch of real friends. But I can look back on friends I've had, and literally around 2018, 2019, 2020, people's wives or husbands would be identified by liberal or conservative. And I never remembered that. Like, growing up, I never fucking knew who anybody voted for. Growing up, I never gave a crap whose politics. But literally, people, when you talk about somebody, oh yeah, that is a care. They use words that would be oh, he's married to a Karen. Oh, you can't talk about this. Or literally, my stepdad was at the deer lease over the weekend. He just told me this story yesterday. He said, oh man, his uncle's has Trump derangement syndrome. Like, that's a thing now, is to identify people by their political beliefs. Now, they got over it because they're all hunting and they're all having a good time and they're drinking coffee, but they would pick on him and they would try to rouse him because he's so anti that guy, that he's so invested in hating this person that he doesn't know, that he's never met, that has no impact on his life. But they picked on him all day but that's how they identified him, as having Trump derangement syndrome. That's still the thing today.
What's fascinating to me here and what you're saying is because there was strong politics in my household growing up, and they didn't always agree. But in the end, like there'd be this big rousing conversation between, 12 people in the house.
Opposing sides,
Yeah. But in the end, everybody's like laughing, even when they're annoyed, they're laughing,
yes.
right? And I look around our world today and go, how did we lose that ability to communicate across lines of difference, even when you strongly disagree, and say, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think we need a solution to this. Now, I don't agree with your solution, but we need a solution, right? How did we lose that? And more to the point, is that a bed worth dying in?
No, I mean, we don't have the answer, but identity politics, and when you made something else your identity other than being a good person, right? When you took on Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal or Trump or Biden, I'll give you an example, right? In the Navy, I was a chief, I was a senior chief. Some people, they make rank and it's a title. CEO, right? We were joking about this earlier with LinkedIn and how you have like 2 employees. How are you a CEO, guy? And shots fired to anybody on LinkedIn who's a CEO who has 2 employees. You're not a CEO. You don't work for a board. You can't get fired. Like, stop it with your titles, right? But people get caught up in titles. And I think COVID and politics and all the just insane narrative driving crazy train that both sides engaged on, both marketing sides, marketing campaigns, because that's what mainstream media became. It became a marketing campaign.
Yep.
They all drove identity. And when my identity is husband, father, Christian, Texan, a little bit, I'm proud of my Texas heritage, right? Born and raised, right? That's my identity. Being a good person, being strong, being dependable, my core values, my beliefs, that is who I am. I'm not going to tell you who I'm very open about who I voted for because, whatever. But that's not who I am. That doesn't define me. Like, stop it if you think that defines me.
Right.
I am a father first, because my wife and I could, I am a father to 3 children. I am a husband. I'm a dog lover, right? My core values, my beliefs, and who I am, that's my identity. Politics be damned, because they change with the wind, and I'm smarter than that. When people got lost in their title and their title became the narrative and they associated as a vaxxer, even that shit, like, that doesn't define me. That's just a choice I made, and I will deal with the consequences. That's it. I didn't wear a mask. I dealt with the consequences. That doesn't define me. I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anti-masker. That's just a choice I made, guys. That's not my fucking identity.
But I think that what you just dropped there is a real gem, because it's something that a lot of people miss, Phil. And that is that what you have chosen isn't your identity. It's a choice you've made, because that's huge. That's huge today. It's like when they passed that law about using pronouns. I'm like,
oh, Jesus.
I had a few colorful words for that. And it was
now
like,
we're talking in third person. Jeez.
And I'm
cow.
like, and I'm like, no, I'm a woman. I'm a mother. In fact, foremost above anything, I'm a woman and a mother. Like, that's part of my identity, right? I have 3 gorgeous children, and they matter so much to me.
Yeah.
And I don't care what laws pass. You can't tell me because that's what I am, And so, but my choices in politics are my choices in which side of the aisle. Really, what it comes down to,
they're choices.
Right? They're choices, and that, I think, in that there's real wisdom. We are not our titles.
No.
And when our titles become us, say mom, fatherhood, that's because it is a part of us. It is a part of us.
And I'm glad you said that, because I will caveat,
please,
I am a masculine man, because if I were to lose a child, God forbid, if I were to lose a child, and here's what you just reminded me, I will say, I've coached men who go through divorce and lose themselves. So you do even have to be careful with the husband. I would argue the father title is pretty strong, because those are my kids for life. But I've coached men who lose themselves and have to find themselves when they go through a divorce. So even that title can be, and that's why I like the idea of my core values, right? I am a father is like a core value because that's not going away, right? I am a father. I'm an uncle to some of my very close friends' kids. I have that natural fatherly drive to support, protect,
Mhm.
teach, take care of. I'm a natural coach. I help coach my daughter's soccer team at times when coach can't be there because that's a core value. It's who I am, but it's not what I am. It's not a decision I made. And it's not an identity that damn sure anybody else gets to put on me. Like
Right.
toxic masculinity or, oh, because you're Caucasian or you're a white male or no, not all that stuff is your baggage you got to deal with. I know
Right.
who I am. I know what I believe. I'm dangerous, right? You want to talk about dangerous man? I know who I am. I know what I believe, and I know the people that are in my circle, and I will defend them to the death, right?
Right. And to close the loop a little bit, to flesh out something and close the loop a little bit, those things that you just quoted are the most important for anyone that's listening in on our podcast and your audience or my audience is that
Yep.
the most important thing when you're thinking of becoming more resilient and self-reliant and becoming dangerous is to know who you are and to know what you're capable of and to define what you're not yet capable of that you want to have in your
Yes.
self-reliance, in your self-reliance kit, if you will. The thing I want to flesh out a little bit is talking to the single parents out there that are single. We have talked a lot about family and community scenarios in this podcast. That in no way means that we're not talking to you too. I understand that your situation is different. I understand up close and personal because I've been in both boats.
Yeah.
I've been in both boats, and it's really hard when you're a single parent to provide both of those things. And
Oh man, very
one of the
difficult.
extremely difficult. And one of the things I'll say is no matter which side you fall on, whether it's fatherhood or motherhood, and if you're doing it by yourself, make part of your tribe or your warrior community. My suggestion is to make part of your tribe or your warrior community, make some of those members have the components that you want your children to have. Like I used to find healthy masculine men to put my kids and myself in a social situation with because we didn't have that in the home. And I wanted that for my kids, right? And I wasn't a woman who's going to be like, oh, go find a man because everything
Yeah,
fell
yeah, yeah,
apart.
yeah.
That's not a healthy approach for me. So what I'm trying to say is for the single parents out there, don't just go, oh, I can't do this, I'm single, oh, they're only talking to families. We're talking to anyone who wants to be
Yes.
self-reliant. Yes, I host the Mamas podcast. Yes, it's for mamas and papas. Yes, it's family centric, but that family can take any shape. We are more
And those families are in our communities.
right. Exactly. They are, and they're part of our communities. And that's why I said, speaking from
Yes.
someone who's been in both boats, I
Yep.
know what it's like. Um, what else would you like to add or finish up here with? I know we're coming up on time, and every time I talk with you, I feel like you have so much to offer. I'm like, oh, I could go down that road. Oh, I could go right.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, and I think we're gonna have to do like around 3 and 4 because preparedness, like you and I have discussed, I'm going down. I'm diving pretty deep right now to help kind of my tribe with
Yeah.
preparedness in different scenarios. So first and foremost, as somebody who was raised by a single mother, mad respect to the women who are doing it on their own. Maybe church is something you could look into. And again, nothing's perfect. Maybe church, maybe a sports league, maybe family close by. Maybe you can, I should say, I am an uncle. We have a very close friend of ours. She's been kind of dating, but not really she has 2 boys. She brought me into their life. She allowed me to train them in the gym. She allowed me to work out with them. She allowed me to build a relationship with them. They actually flew here over the summer and spent a few days with us with Uncle Phil, right? So I'm very proud of that title. I earned that title, and I'm not gonna disrupt that title. So there are ways I would encourage you. Definitely don't shelter in place. Don't try to do it on your own.
Right.
To your point with the cohort, tag along to other events where
Yep.
kids meet other parents, meet other moms that you can kind of facilitate and have your kids around other
Exactly.
situations like that. And then the last thing, I coach men, but I have a podcast. I'm dabbling with YouTube. If any of your listeners ever wanted to reach out and certainly subscribe to the newsletter, reach out, do a free discovery call. Single moms, if I can help you on a 30-minute call, you don't got to pay me. If you want to jump on a call and help solve one problem or help provide from a masculine or standpoint, an opinion, certainly reach out, and I would be honored to be able to help your audience in any way I can.
Okay. Thanks for that. Also, would you share with us not your podcast? You just shared that your website because I know that you had that up and running. It's looking
Yeah,
beautiful.
I do. Yeah, I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I do. That's my only social media. But I just, https philanderton.com. That's where you can subscribe to the newsletter. And I am starting to evolve that with the blog and some of the longer form resources that I'll be sharing. So thank you for letting me drop that.
No, absolutely. And just for all the listeners, and Phil, thank you so much for coming on. This guy knows how to break things down from complex discipline into a way that you can assimilate it pretty fast. And so I'm just going to put a little plug in there for you, Phil, because I see you do that really, really well. I see how you break things down for people. Some people can't do that. So if you're struggling with something like that in your coaching and whatever it is, becoming dangerous, becoming more self-reliant, I really encourage you to reach out to Phil because he's excellent at that. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on again today.
Yeah, thank you. And as we flush out more and you help me with some of the medical and the medicinal and some of the stuff that you've shared with me and that you're really, really good at, like we said, your past is really looking like the way forward. It's kind of coming back around. I've talked to people from Alaska, from the mountains, from the country, the rural, and they're all like, what's the problem? Like, this is how I grew up. Like, this is an easy day. They're not worried. It's the people like me who lived in Houston their whole life. And they're like, oh, I can't even get a tomato plant without killing it, So I'm interested for that help from you. I'm interested in that help from you as we kind of develop, and then let's bring that next step. Let's bring some of that to your audience. I'm looking forward to doing that with you.
Let's do. And you made me remember something. Someone asked me when COVID hit, when we were like somewhere halfway through lockdown, somebody asked me how I was doing. And it never occurred to me really, Phil, until someone asked. And so we'll kind of end on this.
What do you mean? What's the problem?
Yeah, on this little story. But they asked me how I was doing, and I was like, oh, pretty well. And then they talked about isolation and its effect on them, this whole 9 yards. And I remember listening and suddenly realizing, oh, because I grew up with 8 and 9 months of winter. We were snowed in that long without contact with other humans. And I looked at the person who was asking me the question, and I said, I think my background uniquely prepared me for this. I'm all right,
Yeah, that's awesome.
So to your point, absolutely more than happy to help out your audience, my audience. Just reach out to
what a resource you're going to be. Yeah, moving forward. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. All right, that wraps this up. Have a great day.